Alex Murdaugh done with his testimony after another dramatic day in his double murder trial. The disgraced attorney admits to being a pill-popping serial liar, but not a murderer. Prosecutors attempting to poke holes in his timeline of what happened that night. Yesterday, Murdaugh changed his story to admit that he was at the dog kennels where his wife and son were slayed, something he did not tell police at the time.
All of this, the last time you supposedly saw your wife and child, all of this detail, you as a lawyer and a prosecutor didn't think that was important to offer on your own?
Oh, I think it's important.
And now that Murdaugh copped to lying about being at the kennels, he told prosecutors today that when he left his wife and son, minutes before they were slaughtered, no one else was around.
Were the dogs barking and carrying on, or going out into the woods, or acting like they sensed somebody was around that they didn't know?
No,
they weren't.
There was nobody around that the dogs didn't know. There was nobody else around.
All right, good.
For them to sense.
But the most explosive moment of the day, Murdaugh putting forward his own theory on who murdered his family. He believes it's revenge over a boat accident involving his now deceased son, Paul. Paul was driving the family's boat drunk when it crashed and killed one of his friends.
I didn't believe that any of the families, the people that were involved in the boat wreck, had anything to do with hurting Maggie and Paul. Okay. But I can tell you that at that time, and as I sit here today, that I believe that boat wreck is the reason why Paul and Maggie were killed.
So we've got random vigilantes because of the boat wreck.
Now, I don't know that they're random vigilantes.
Well, you just said it wasn't the family or the kid, or the kids or the family of the other kids in the boat, right? So you're saying it's somebody off of social media, and you don't have any evidence of that, do you? You just believe that, and you're just telling that jury that as you try to explain the lie that you told for the first time yesterday. Isn't that right?
No, sir, that's not right.
So what you're telling this jury is that it's a random vigilante.
That's your
the 12-year-old, the 12-year-old 5'2" people that just happened to know that Paul and Maggie were both at Moselle on June 7th, that knew that they would be at the kennels alone on June the 7th, that knew that you would not be there, but only between the times of 8:49 and 9:02, that they show up without a weapon, assuming that they're going to find weapons and ammunition there, that they commit this crime during that short time window, and then they travel the same exact route that you do around the same time to Alameda. That's what you're trying to tell this jury?
You got a lot of factors in there, Mr. Waters, all of which I do not agree with, but some of which I do.
So, Judge Pirro, how important was it that Murdaugh put forward this alternative theory of the killing?
Well, look, he started this yesterday. This guy is without a doubt one of the best, not just defendants, certainly the best defendant, but the best witnesses I've seen on a courtroom stand. Nobody can put words in his mouth as hard as they try. No one can pull the wool over his eyes. He is sharper right now than that prosecutor is, and that prosecutor has a game plan. This guy has to have a terrific memory to be able to keep straight on the lies that he's telling. Okay, but what's going on today is that he has consistently added another possibility, and so some jurors are going to say, there could be someone out there who did this, okay? But if the prosecutor has any brains, and I don't like that cross-examination. Yesterday, I was like, I like him, he's a bulldog, but you can't be a bulldog straight for 2 days. The jury is gone. They left after the third time you stole and you looked in their eyes. Okay, they're saying he's a liar, a thief, and a con man. He says, I am. But the problem is that when he said he left the scene and he goes back, within 2 minutes, all of a sudden, he calls him again. Why is he calling Mags and Pawpaw again? And he's making 293 footsteps. He's pacing. He's pacing because they're not answering the phone, but he's only 1,100 yards away. All he has to do is get back in the golf cart and go back there. But the prosecutor isn't making the point the way he should. His summation has to be brilliant. It has to hit all the points that he missed. Understand one thing. A verdict in a criminal case, a murder case, any criminal case has to be beyond a reasonable doubt unanimous. I would bet my house that there's one person who's going to hang on this jury, if not more than one person.
She's got a pretty nice house, Harold. You want to take her up on that?
Well, first, it's good to be back around the table.
Thank you. It's good to have you back.
I hope the judge is wrong. She has a lot of experience in this and understands courtrooms and prosecutions and prosecutors. I didn't watch a whole lot of this, admittedly, till today, and I read a lot about it as we were going to talk about it today. And I guess I agree with the judge in one huge regard. I think the jury, who we never saw on television, at least I didn't see my television, at least Fox didn't have it on. We couldn't see the jury. Maybe somebody else did, but we couldn't see it. It all depends on what the jury believes this man right here did between 8:49 p.m. and 9:02 p.m. Because if you believe that he lied about everything before, there are a lot of things before that, and you believe he lied about some things after that, which he admitted to, and he lied about some things he did in his own private, personal, private, commercial practice in life, and he talked about the law being such an important part of his family's life, and it is, and he has an honorable history, his great-grandfather, his grandfather, great-grandfather, and father. How does he not remember that 13 minutes, and how could someone have gotten on the property? I do agree with the judge in this regard. If I were the prosecutor, I probably would have put a big whiteboard up, a big larger-than-life Karl Rove whiteboard up, and just wrote down all of these things, because I would want the jury to relate, as they sat back in that room, to remember what he was doing when he wrote those things up on that whiteboard. But look, I'm not going to second-guess the prosecution. They saw what they saw that jury, that prosecutor had an opportunity. I think his name was Waters, but no relation. No relation. And so he saw what the jury was thinking, and he could see their eyes, and we'll find out here shortly. I guess the one question I would have for the judge, not to take this from you, Jesse, at all, but is, what do you think they do? Will they have an opportunity to call? Because would you call maybe a police officer or somebody just to reaffirm and reinforce for the jury that he lied to them? And when did they think he might have been lying?
I would absolutely, as a DA, as a prosecutor.
Do they have that right in South Carolina? I don't know enough about that.
You have the right to offer rebuttal to testimony, okay? But the problem is, as a judge, I'm not going to allow it because it's not material to the murder. We've already established that he's lied. So I'm going to say, as a judge, the jury already heard that. You can bring it up in summation. You can read the record. That's it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't have a ton of physical evidence, right? They don't have the murder weapon. They do have that video that shows he was around the crime scene at the time.
My understanding that it's all circumstantial evidence. So the prosecutor and Murdaugh himself has established, I'm a liar. He's a liar. He lies about everything. If he lies about all these other things, why wouldn't he be lying about killing his wife and son? But that's not the standard. The standard is beyond a reasonable doubt on the murder charges. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt on whether he's a liar or not. So that's maybe not going to fly when it comes to the jury deliberating. One thing that he was asked by his defense attorney before they adjourned for the day was, did you murder Maggie and Paul? And he said, I would never hurt either one of them. He did not say no. So maybe that, it's a very lawyerly answer to give by not giving a yes or no answer.
I said murder would hurt, though. Like, that would hurt.
Yeah, it would hurt. But he didn't answer that question. And, of course, the remaining question is, if he didn't do it, who did? Well, and the police clearly don't have any other leads when it comes to who may have done this.
Right, but Judge, I agree with you. I think that there's going to be one person who might say, I don't know. I mean, there are plenty of reasons, from what I understand, to hate this family and to hate more than just him, and to be so mad at that kid who was driving the boat and killed that girl. I mean, do I think that's what happened? No, I think that he killed these people. But actually, I think the prosecutor's plan was to be, okay, I'm going to show this guy that this guy's a liar, that this guy's an addict. And he's saying, absolutely, I am. And because I'm such an addict, that's why maybe I behaved in some crazy ways back there, but I would never do this. And he is doing such a great job. And it's almost, it makes you hate him even more, because you can see how you can get away with all of these different things that they've seemed to have gotten away with their entire lives by the way he's coming off there. After like a year of a horrendous media about what trash all of these people are, to be able to watch that and have him still come off as pretty sympathetic.
Can I ask the judge one thing? But Judge, when in light of what was said, wouldn't you want to call the police back to at least rebut the fact that we did explore and we did look into these other things, and we found that was not there?
That's like the defense in O.J. Simpson saying, or the prosecution say, we're going to call somebody and say, we already checked everybody else out. No, it's an argument.
He introduced that, and
Murdaugh introduced.
So I'm a lawyer. I didn't practice like you, but I went to a little law school.
He opened the door. You're right, but that's not material. You don't have to eliminate everyone to be able to indict this person. I'll tell you what the winner is here for him in terms of his being acquitted. 2 guns. I was talking to a friend of mine, Bill Fitzpatrick. He's the DA in Onondaga County. He was the president of the national DAs for years. We were pals and still are. He said to me, Janine, in all your years, at 30 of yours and 40 of his at this point, have you ever seen a homicide scene where they use 2 guns with 1 person? I said, never. He said, Janine, never. He said, I've never seen it. You've never seen it. What does that tell you?
Quick question. If he skates on the double homicide, can he still go to prison for all the
financial
corruption?
crimes? And this is one thing the jury may say. They may say, look, we're going to let him go. He's going to be convicted of financial crimes.
And
he's already
facing,
admitted
how much
it.
is he facing for all the
Probably 100
embezzlement?
years.
Forever.
A long time?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.